we're on. Number 99, Be Not Dismayed. What's that?
I'll let you lead
Okay. Be not dismayed, whatever betide, God will take care of you. Beneath His wings of love abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. Through days of toil the heart doth fail, God will take care of you. When dangers fierce your path assail, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. All you may need, He will provide. God will take care of you. Nothing you ask will be denied. God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. No matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. Lean, weary one upon His breast, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. One more? Another one?
100. Speak now.
Go, Paul.
That's it.
I was already there, Paul.
Good on you, man. All over like a fake kid.
Encouraging.
You don't want a cupcake.
Haven't you? That's as old as me.
Say that again.
100.
All over it like a fat kid on a cupcake. We're not live out yet.
We are.
We are live, Paul.
This is Australia.
Excuse me, yeah. Well,
It's Kiwi though.
It's Kiwi.
You can say that.
$100.
Oh,
Yeah, it's flat, it's waiting.
obviously my slight low playing of it, she didn't pick up the tune. We have to lay down and see. Okay. This is easy. This is easy. Okay, go.
what do you sing?
I just changed key.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
My expectations are low.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Adrian. Welcome back.
It's good to be back. Good to be back.
In sunny Queensland.
With a heat wave tomorrow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 37 or something.
37.
Yeah.
I've been in Bangkok, not a problem. That was hot. That was very hot. Well, I missed you all. So, shall we have a prayer? I dropped in the link for the live stream into our group so that other people can be aware of it.
Yes.
So hopefully a few more will join us tonight. So let's have a prayer and we'll get underway. Father in heaven, I just thank you so much that you take care of us. I thank you for taking care of me over the last 10 weeks, travelling to many different countries. Thank you for the prayers of my brothers and sisters here and others around the world. As we think about the beautiful truths that we are learning, our hearts are made warm and with a great desire to share with others how wonderful our Father is. And I just pray that you would bless us tonight as we share together. And I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So I want to share with you a few stories, just a few, and maybe do a little bit of Bible study on some of the things that we're learning. First thing I wanted to show you is some handiwork that Tony and Anna Pace, they put this hardcover large edition Agape together.
Is it large print?
I wouldn't say it's slightly larger print. Slightly larger print. So he's made a nice hardcover version of Agape for those online. Thought I'd share that with you. One story, one of a number of stories I want to share, but just I was on the plane from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and I'm sitting in my seat, and I'm sitting there, and I'm saying, Lord, I just open the way so I can talk to someone. I just want to be able to talk to someone about our wonderful Father. And so I'm sitting there, and the lady sitting beside me, we thought that the people coming into the plane, it was like it was finished, and she thought, oh, I'm going to go and sit around there. So she sits in the seat in front, and I moved over a seat so that I made more room for the other people. And as I move over, I'm closer to the guy just across the aisle. I was in an aisle seat. And we started talking. He worked with some football team in Cape Town area or South Africa. He sounded English, but he was working with a football team. And we just started talking, and he asked me the question, so, you know, what do you do? So I thought, good question. So I started talking to him about, you know, the issue of suicide. And this is an area that has affected my life, people in my life that have taken their own lives, and it's affected me. And I started to talk to him about this, and then he said, well, before that he said, wow, it's funny, we were just talking about this yesterday in the team, you know, team morale and everything like that. And just then some more people came along, and the lady in front, the guy came and says, that's my seat. So she had to come, so I had to move back into the other seat, and she moved back into her seat. And so I said, sorry, and I sort of kept talking across to this guy, and we started talking about domestic violence and other things like that. And I said, sorry, you know, I hope she says, no, I'm really interested in what you're saying. Keep talking. So I ended up talking to both of them. And she was a financial advisor in the banking industry. She'd been to most countries in Africa, and she'd been hired by a particular company. There was a bank in a particular country that wanted to invest in family business, and she was tasked with bringing an investor into, you know, to lure an investor to help invest in this type of work. And she shared with me a little bit, and, you know, I kept talking with them both, and then I was able to offer them a copy of the book Identity Wars, and they both said, we're going to read this, you know, like, and she's just started to open up and share about her life. And she's originally from the United States, now living in South Africa. She's been in South Africa for 12 years, and just this whole identity thing. And she was asking me about, you know, well, how do you help people to change in their sense of their value in themselves? And I explained to her the blessing principle, how we do the blessing, and she was really captured by it. And she started talking about her brother, and her brother is really wanting his sons to be, you know, top athletes, and he flew one of his sons to Portugal for specialist training in soccer. You know, just no high pressure. He's only 13, 14, and he's already being flown for the, you know, really high pressure coaching and stuff like that. And she says, he really needs to read this book. And then we're just about coming into Johannesburg, and as we're coming in, there's this storm front coming in as we're about to land, and the plane is coming around to line up, and as we're going around, like, the plane is like, oh man, we were bouncing, and stomach up in the throat and down, and she's just hanging onto her seat. She's closing her eyes, and she's a little bit stressed, and I just sort of said to her, are you okay? And she didn't say anything. She's just hanging on. I mean, because we were dancing, bouncing around, and she said, man, you are completely calm. And I said, I'm on my Father's business, and nothing's going to happen to me, so you're going to be fine. So it was just one of quite a number of stories that talking to people and being able to share books with them. Spoke to a young man on the flight from Bangkok. We left at midnight the other night, and this young man, and sit down, he's actually from the Gold Coast. He's doing an apprenticeship in building. He's about 20 years of age. We just sit down, we start talking, and I think he asked me about my book, I got onto the subject of my book, and I said something about self-worth from a Christian perspective. He says, "Are you a Christian?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "So am I." He said, "I thought you were a Christian. You just had that look about you." so we got into a good discussion, and I was able to share Identity Wars with him, and I gave him a copy of Agape as well. So we had story after story after story where this was happening, and there's many of them that I could share, but they're just two of the highlights of some of the experiences that we had going from place to place. It was a tremendous blessing when we were in South Africa to have Reuben and Ben with us during our time there. We were in Pietermaritzburg for a camp that had been organised there, and man, it was cold. It's about 14 degrees during the day. A couple of days it was rainy, cold. Like poor old Reuben, didn't suit him. I mean, it was too cold for me, but anyway, this is in October, early October, but it was still a bit cold. But we had a tremendous time, and this time, sharing the message, we'd been there the year before and started to explain to them some of the principles of our loving Heavenly Father and how gracious and how loving He is. And last year, a number of them had said to me, like last year, we know you shared on this, and it was like this. The kind of reaction was like, "Oh yes, oh I don't know." Get to the hard stories, the hard questions, and some of the things that we'd been sharing with them, they kind of got lost in some of the other things, and they kind of just sort of dropped it. And this is happening for a lot of people on the subject of the character of God, just not able to stick. And this year when I came and explained some more things to them, and explaining in more detail, the things they'd learnt before combined with what we taught this time, they became more solidified in the truth of our loving Heavenly Father. And that was a tremendous experience. We did have a little bit of opposition, some fairly vocal opposition, and there's some more videos circulating around about the heresies that we're supposedly teaching, but that's okay. That's a good sign. Actually, one of them put up a video recently directly attacking our message, and some gentleman saw the video, and because it was so biased, he went and actually watched because they took clips of one of my videos and clipped it out and made me look really good. Ministration of death, probably for them more than me. But this guy said, "Oh, go and actually watch the original." And he watched it, and he said, "Hey, this is pretty good." He said, and he looked at a bit more stuff, and then he emailed me, and he said, "Yeah, there's some people out there, they're not saying some really nice things about you." I said, "Take a ticket, stand in line." So, and he said, "Oh, I really enjoyed it." He said, "When are you coming back to the US? I really want to meet you. This is really, really good. Have you got any more stuff?" So you can't work against the truth, can you? That was a tremendous blessing, and to be able to see these things come up this time, and the message that's come for us, do not judge. I'm not going to judge. Don't have to worry about this. It's not my problem. It's just we keep sharing the Word of God, and the Lord will bless us. Another beautiful experience I got to, and this will interest you, I got to meet with Lorraine, who is the head of Sunnyside, the retirement village hostel that we've been supporting as a group. And I got to present to them there, and we sang some songs. And it was really good to catch up with Lorraine. Of course, they still have plenty of needs. Their facility is an absolute miracle, how that they keep going and they can keep doing the things they're doing. But I got to meet a number of the folk there. And one of the ladies there, she'd been on the street. She'd had such a tough life, been in gangs, dealing drugs, and she'd been really, really ill, and one of the, I don't know exactly what sickness it was, but she became, I don't know whether it's brain damaged or she just was a little bit slow and her speech was a bit slurred in her speaking, and she was not in a good way. And Lorraine took her in and she worked with her and got her to be able to start feeding herself again and sort of stabilise, because her hands weren't that stable, and shared with her the love of God, and she gave her heart to Christ, and I had the privilege of baptising her. And Reuben and I were able to sing for her, "Are you tired of chasing pretty rainbows? You know, pack up all the shattered dreams of your life." And the tears are just streaming down her face. It makes me cry. And to be able to baptise her, it was a tremendous privilege to be able to do that. And we went into a friend of one of Lorraine's brother's wives, you know, contact. They opened up their swimming pool, and they weren't Christian at all. And but there they are watching us do this baptism in their backyard, asking questions, and it was a real blessing. Working with a gentleman there in the Cape Town area, Frikkie van Rensburg, and Ben, Reuben and I stayed with him and his wife for nearly 3 weeks. So some of them wanted to put us up in a hotel, and I said, I'd rather spend the money on something else if we can. You know, if we have to be in a hotel, we'll do that. But we'd rather be, if we can stay with someone, I'd rather stay with someone and spend time with them. And we were out letterboxing the public program that we did in Cape Town, just advertising some of the meetings, and that was just, it was a blessing to be able to start thinking towards a public program, thinking for the future of what we might do here in our meetings. But again, the meetings that we did there, we didn't. There wasn't anyone that I could see that came from the general public, but a number of people did come that had previously been to meetings that were not fully convinced, but they became much more excited about the message. So it was a real consolidation process for a lot of people. And the fact that I had gone back from a public perspective and had broken things right down, that's what people needed. So it was well suited for going right back and explaining the divine pattern principles and the blessing, and again, to go to these different places and invite people forward for the blessing. It was a tremendously blessed time to be able to do that. I was amazed at how the Lord gave me stamina to keep going. So as I recorded some statistics, and I put some of them online. I think in this year we've done 126 hours of flying this year, and done well in excess of 130 meetings, and praise the Lord, because that's just one lady, she came to me after in Durbanville, which is in the north of Cape Town, and I did 4 meetings in one day, and she came the next day. She said, "You must have had a really good sleep like that. I mean, you spoke so much yesterday." And I mean, 4 times. Oh, it's about average. And you look refreshed. I said, "Well, actually, the rugby union was on, and apparently, and there was a party on, and it was in Europe, so I don't know, they were yahooing until 2 o'clock in the morning, so I only got about 4.5 hours sleep, so, but I'm fine, I'm good." So, I'd sort of be half asleep and someone would score a try and hear this tremendous roar whoa, because we were staying in a flat, and someone on the level below, they were watching the game at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that was very interesting. It was amazing when we were in a place called Oudtshoorn, which is about 400 kilometres in from Cape Town towards the east, and a beautiful family there that Cedric and his wife Lydia, and we baptised their daughter last year, Bramilda. She's 15, and she just loves this message. She's full on into this message. The whole family does, and but last year we, by chance, as we would say in human speak, Cedric and I were walking on a street and we bumped into 2 other guys from the church, and we invited them. Cedric invited them to come around, and we just shared with them a little bit about the divine pattern, and that was enough. They're in the church, and they were really taken with the divine pattern principles, and so those seeds grew, and we were able to spend a Sabbath with them and do a number of meetings, and there was about 4 families that were there, and they were just drinking it in. It was just tremendous the way that went. There was another meeting we had with a coloured community on another part of Oudtshoorn, and we went there, and this I started sharing about the divine pattern, and as I was getting into it, this brother started putting out Spirit of Prophecy quotes about eternity, and I didn't know what he believed, but I could see within a short period of time that he was defending the Trinitarian position. And he started to take over the meeting and be a little bit argumentative, but not unruly, but I just let him speak, and I tried to keep going, and it sort of interrupted again, and then he started to try to talk to people about the importance of the Trinity, and he had a booklet that he'd prepared, and he went down the front and he said, I want everyone to read this booklet, take your time to read this booklet, and he didn't give me much of a chance to respond to him. And he said, well, I've got another appointment I've got to go to. I just wanted to let you know, and here's the booklets, and I'm going to go now. And I said to him, brother, that is not fair. I said, you need to just sit down for a little bit and just listen. I'm pleading with you, just listen a little bit longer. And he's concerned about, this division that's coming into the church, this disruption, this division that's coming in. And I said, I really hear what you're saying. I love the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And then I was in a predicament because he was from the church, and the guy on the other side was saying that the Adventist Church is Babylon. So I was kind of caught between these 2 guys, and so as soon as I said, I believe the Seventh-day Adventist Church is God's church, I could hear the other guy muttering away under his breath. I'm going, oh man, this is going to be good. So anyway, I kept labouring with this brother and appealing to him to just consider and to take time, and we're all trying to work through this together, and you're still my brother, and I still love you. And I said, look, and I came down, I said, look, I want to give you a hug. So so I went down there, I embraced him. He was a bit but Cedric said to me afterwards, he said they're going to remember what you did tonight when you went up to this guy and you embraced this guy. And particularly, he said, this guy lived in the apartheid years. He knows, when someone in his position would interrupt your meeting and do what he did to you, they were all expecting a very different response from the one that you gave. And that was basically sit down and shut up. That was what they were expecting me to say. And the fact that I'd go down and give him a hug, it was a little bit exasperating, just, with what he was trying to do. But anyway, and then I was able to plead with the other brother, because then he did leave after that, and I spoke to the other brother, about and I just asked him a question, have you been put out of the church? And he started to share how he was treated and thrown out of the church. And, I said, yeah, brother, we've a number of us are in that boat. It doesn't help to be bitter, you know what I mean? And I just laboured with him for a bit, and he was thinking about it. So that was certainly an interesting experience. Other than that, we didn't really have much opposition. There wasn't a lot of opposition, and people were drinking in the word. It was a tremendous blessing. One of the things that Reuben and I and Ben did while we were in Cape Town is that just feeling the burden for the work and the people that we're working with and the challenges that we're facing, we just wanted more of the Spirit to be able to do what we were doing, and we decided to it's Reuben. We decided to take the full hour of the morning sacrifice and just pray through the whole hour, and we, as much as we could, we did in the afternoon as well. And we just felt that it made a difference. It made a difference in the work that we're doing, the contacts that we're making, the interests, and it's not in the context of, okay, if I pray for an hour and I've prayed for an hour now, God's going to give me, I've earned this, No, it's simply a matter of, I just want people to know how wonderful my Father in heaven is. I want to spend more time with my Father on my knees, and I just want to talk to him. And you look at the people everywhere. And I was in Bangkok the other night, and I was up on the 40th floor of a building, just looking out over that city. 12 million people. How many of them? How many of them can we reach? People, as we see, some people are talking about the close of probation in March next year. I'm going, well, who's going to go to Asia? Hang on, wait. Just, if they could only know our Heavenly Father and how wonderful He is. And so I've just found a tremendous solace in taking that time to pray. And it has certainly impacted on my preaching, and I'd like to share with you some of the things, just a few of the things that we've been learning. But I'll share with you another story that was after we started this prayer process. We went to some meetings in a little place called Saron, and largely a coloured community, and they had hired a facility on short notice and invited a number of people to come. A minister from another church group came to the meeting. And that night, the first thing is that morning, because we'd come the night before and it was during the wheat harvest, and the air was just full of these particles, and my eyes, when I went to bed that night, I nearly wanted to rub my eyes out. And sneezing, and the next morning I just said, we need to pray. And but again, you get to that point, like, should I go back to Cape Town, which I was already having a bit of trouble there, but it was much worse up here in the wheatfield areas. And it was like, no, I came here to preach. I'm not going anywhere. So we're gonna pray. And so I was able to. I arranged some. We went to the store, and I got something to alleviate the symptoms. And by the evening, I was okay. I was stable again. I wasn't. I was able to not have difficulty. And so on that particular night, this gentleman was there. When I preached, I just felt the power of the Spirit of God in such a tremendous way when I spoke about the begotten Son, the Son of God. And it was deeply impacting. I could see everyone was deeply impacted, and it's something that happens. It happens often, but as I'm preaching, I'm doing everything I can to stop myself from crying, because you just feel it coming out. It's coming out fast. It's coming out crisp. when you're preaching, you kind of have to stop yourself. It's coming out, and you know the blessing that's coming out to people. And this minister afterwards, Ben was speaking to him, and he said to Ben, "Wow, I've learned a lot tonight, and things I didn't know." And so Ben said, "Yeah, you want to talk to him?" Oh. So he brought him down, and so we had a bit of a chat, and he wanted to know more. Anyway, we teed up so that I could go and visit with him a couple of days later, and we had a Bible study in the afternoon together, doing some Bible study on the divine pattern and a number of other things. And we were talking about one section in Daniel, and he goes to his library and he pulls out this book, and he's flicking through, because I was talking about the sanctuary, and he's flicking through for pictures of the sanctuary. And as he's flicking through the book, I'm looking at the pictures in the book, and I'm going, those pictures look very Adventist to me. And the book was actually written by an Adventist, and this book who it was written by was an elder of one of the churches in Cape Town that I had actually met and dialogued with the year before. And he'd been reading this book and was sharing some of the content with his congregation. So I had a big smile on my face when I saw that. I thought, here I am. I'm working in conjunction with my Adventist brother. He'd produced this book with all these beautiful Adventist messages in it, not knowing that I could come along and build on everything that he had been sharing and in his book, and I could share it and take it to the next level with the divine pattern. So I love working with my Adventist brothers and sisters like that. It's really really good. And so he took quite a number of books, and he said, I'm going to be sharing this in my church, and we've got a meeting with my fellow leaders, and we're going to be preaching the divine pattern. So
So is this a 7-day Adventist?
No.
Sunday?
Yes. So that was wonderful man. And the thing about it was the humility of this man to say, he said, teach me. He's a minister of another whole group. No pride, no arrogance, from the coloured community. Brother, I hear the Spirit in your preaching. Teach me.
Is that the answer to Ian, who always wants to know, what book can I give to the Sunday people that he goes to know? Well, there you go.
He loved the divine pattern.
Give him the book of your love, Ian, as a suggestion.
Sorry,
Ian could give him the book of his love and concern. That
Yeah.
may indeed
Yes, that's it.
influence people.
So that was such a blessing, and we would get onto things, and then we would start to, as you often do, you sort of go off on a bit of a tangent, and then he'd say, no, I don't want to get off track, keep talking, keep teaching. I mean, this guy was focused. He was focused, he wanted answers, he was listening, putting the pieces together. And so I just want to pray for this. I guess they're a Pentecostal group in north of Cape Town, and it was a really, really good experience. Just some other things that we were sharing, and I shared on the sermon of the template for the judgment, how my Father doesn't judge, and just a group of Adventists, a few of them were sitting down in the front, and they'd, you share with them the brass mirror, and they've just got that deer in the headlights look like, oh, what is this? What is this? And then when I shared the template of the judgment, the Father doesn't judge, and this guy, he was shaking his head and he was just laughing like, this is incredible. Like, what is this? But, having the courage to listen and to take it on board, these things are challenging. If you've come from a position of, I'm an Adventist, I'm rich and increased with goods, I don't have any need of anything else. And then to get hit with a message like that, it's just like, this is the problem with this message, that in order to accept it, you have to acknowledge something. You have to acknowledge, like, where have I been? like, what? What's been going on? Some of us have had to learn fast, haven't we? And so that was a little bit of first fruits from outside the family, the immediate family. The extended family is starting to get word of this. And again, wherever I've gone, when I talk to people, because they don't know who you are, people are very open to discuss about these subjects of God and what God is like, and you know, the God of violence in the Old Testament. We're able to, on the plane, we gave away many books to people on the planes, and other places we were able to share with them, and it was an incredible blessing to be able to do that. Very touching story in Germany, because our first stop, of course, was Talking Rock, and we ran some meetings over the Day of Atonement there, and again we had a tremendously blessed time there with Gary and Carolyn and all the staff there. One of the staff members, he'd recently come to work with them, and you just see the hand of the Lord. He'd been a policeman, and he'd been in situations where, in order to maintain the peace, he had to end the lives of a few people. And this just troubled him tremendously, apart from all the other things that he'd seen working there in the south. And he was troubled by many of the things that he'd seen, and you would know Paul, and working as a policeman. I think he was working in some special sector, so he was in for more of that stuff than usual, I think. And so he had befriended, he was actually working in a hardware store, and Sharon, you all know Sharon, she was looking for something in the store, and he helped her. Anyway, things worked out that he started to come out and work, and I got to meet him there. And he was really taking an interest in the message. But shortly after we left, I don't know what happened, but he was feeling under tremendous pressure, and these demons, he called them, these demons that were hassling him and that were attacking him, I'm not sure what happened, but he took his own life. I was in South Africa at the time when I got the message, and it really devastated a lot of us. He's just on the edge, you know. He was just on the edge and reaching out, and then feeling the pressure. I mean, he did it in front of his wife, so he had tremendous pain going on in his life, and that was pretty hard, because you know we'd just been with him, and it was 3 weeks after this, and he was excited, but something went wrong, and you're constantly reminded of how much Satan is working to destroy people's lives. And that was a very sad reminder of how things can change so suddenly. It's not the outcome that you're expecting, and it came as a tremendous shock. And it was particularly a shock for Ben. Ben had been working with him quite closely and had been sharing with him, and he'd written this beautiful letter about Ben and what a blessing he was and an encouragement. So he took it really hard, because he'd spent the most amount of time with him. And so pray for Talking Rock as they were trying to recover from that situation. He was their maintenance man. He was doing a lot of handiwork around the place. Really, really nice guy. And so that was a real low point for us in our journey as we tried to take all that in. It was wonderful for the first time to go to Puerto Rico, and Carlos and Haiti were there, and had some wonderful meetings to be able to just share together there and get the work initiated. Just as we were leaving, and this is just on the beginning of Tabernacles, just as we were leaving, Ben and I, at this particular point, there's quite a number of guys now that are going full-time into this work. Ruben being one of them, Ben being another one, Carlos is another one, Daniel Bernhard is another. and some others that are going full-time into this work, or who are already full-time into this work, and just saying, Lord, I know that you're going to supply. And just as we're heading down, we got a phone call from someone who really felt convicted to support the work, and has put us in a place where we can support a number of guys and print a number of books in a number of different locations. And I'm just like, praise God, this is such a blessing to be able to be put in that position. You just trust the Lord that He's going to provide. So that was a big Tabernacles gift from our Father in heaven. So we're going to be able to print a number of books in South America as a result and get some things going. We're going to be doing the Theos series in French. That's going to be voiced over, so we can have that in French. We're still, as you would see, we're still moving ahead with the Agape video series that's coming along. You've been watching those. Number 8 is nearly finished. So, one of the new guys on the team who's now working at Talking Rock, Chris Sepulveda, he's now going to be doing some of the audio books for us. He's got a very good reading voice, and we're going to have audio. You've been waiting. Hey, very nice, wonderful young man, and he was the one that well, he was one of a number of people that were in the San Jose syndrome, just like, wow. And he's moved from California and is now working with us in Talking Rock. So that is just some of the highlights of many things that we're able to engage in. And there's more things that I want to share, but I will get some more pictures and do a proper report when we next have a Sabbath meeting and do that. But I thought I'd share with you a little bit of Bible study. How does that sound?
Wonderful.
That's what we want to do. So I want to bring the board over. Some thoughts that have really been impressed upon my mind. Things that are coming together as the message keeps growing.
Well, apologies, but because I have to leave in like 9 minutes, I may as well just go now. Yeah.
No worries.
Welcome home. Good evening.
Thank you.
See you, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. Yes.
See you, mate. So, one of the things that we've been focusing on as a group has been the subject of the metals in the sanctuary, the brass and the silver and the gold. And one of the most, I guess, challenging verses to understand in reference to the cross, when you come to John chapter 3, and trying to understand this process. Like, yes, we think we have a grasp on it, but this statement that Jesus makes in verse 14 of John chapter 3, it says, "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up." And you think of this story, a serpent as a symbol of Christ on the cross. How do we connect this story? Okay, Jesus paid the penalty. Yes, Satan is exposed as a murderer. He's being exposed through this process. But this serpent as a symbol, and it's what sort of a serpent is it? What's it made of?
Brass.
It's made of brass. And so we've been doing this research on brass. Like, whoa, what's it made of brass? Why is it made of brass? And so when you come to Numbers chapter 21, now what's really interesting about Numbers 21, of course, we've done some research in preparing Agape, In the beginning of this chapter, this is the chapter, Numbers 21, is where Israel vows a vow to God. If you hand over these Canaanites, we will annihilate them. We'll wipe them out. And God hearkens under the voice of Israel. He allows them to do what they wish to do. And they slaughter these people. And what is interesting to me, this is just some observations, because this is quite a horrific event. God in grief allows them to slaughter these Canaanites. This is not what God wanted, but he hearkened unto their voice and he allowed them to do it. You would think if this was they were filled with the Spirit of God when they made this vow and they would do this and they won a great victory, why is it that the very next verse it says, and they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom, and the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. So they've had this tremendous victory, apparently, and now they're really, really discouraged. Would you be tempted to be discouraged if you've got these pictures in your mind of you slaughtering men, women, children and animals, just wiping a lot of them out? You've got these pictures. Would that discourage you? I think that would discourage me if I had those pictures going through my head, and the humanity, their own humanity. But of course, the next verse is what's interesting to me, and I haven't done an exhaustive search, but this is, to my knowledge, the first time where it actually says the children of Israel speak directly against God. In previously to this, they'd spoken against Moses, against Aaron. They hadn't spoken directly against God, but in this verse it says, and the people spake against God and against Moses. Wherefore have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. So you win this supposedly great victory, then they become discouraged, and they are just directly attacking God and speaking against God. And what's interesting is after that, of course, is that the Lord released, as it says, sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. And we know this story, but it's interesting how this story is directly connected to their desire to genocide a nation. They complete that, they become discouraged, they become angry, they accuse God, then things start to happen to them, they start to die. And the verse 8, and the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And is this the principle of anti-venom? You take an element of the serpent, and you put it up before the people, and if the people look upon it, is that the principle that God's trying to teach them? We see here that God is allowing this ministration of death to take place. He's allowing sin to abound in order for God to help them to realize the dangerous situation that they are in. But notice that it says, did we read the part about brass? No. Oh yeah, verse 9. And Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. There's such a deep illustration here. Now what's interesting is when you study, I think we've looked at this, that brass is made of two elements, and that's copper and zinc. Now in the body, copper and zinc, they are antagonistic to each other. They're opposites.
Yeah, if you have one, the other.
When one goes up,
The
other one's going down. And they work opposites, in opposite ways in the body. And it's interesting to note that who was the first man to actually manufacture brass? The Bible actually tells us. And it's interesting for us to understand. It's in Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4. And we see Tubal-Cain. Tubal-Cain. Now, Tubal was one of the sons of Lamech, who was the son of, well, we read in verse 18, because Cain had a son called Enoch. There's a different Enoch to the one that was translated, obviously. Enoch was born, to Enoch was born Irad, to Irad, Mahulia, all those names. Mahujael begat Methusael, and you got the list there, and then we get to Lamech, or Lamech. And Lamech was the first one who took 2 wives. So obviously an interesting character. And he's the one that says, if Cain be avenged 7 times, I shall be avenged, what did he say? 70-fold. 70 and 7-fold. There we go. 7-fold, then Lamech. Now it's interesting that how it says there that, verse 22, and Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, born of Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and in iron. It's interesting that, who do you think was the one that would have had the inspiration of this man's mind? The principle of taking 2 oppositional principles and fusing them together to make brass, to make an alloy. And what I find very interesting about brass is that how God has used this as a symbol for us, because the copper and the zinc are, I believe, representing 2 oppositional principles. And one is God's mercy and Satan's justice. As we've read in the Spirit of Prophecy, God's mercy and justice stood in opposition to each other. Why did they stand in opposition to each other? Because Satan had introduced this oppositional element to make justice and mercy appear in opposition to each other. And so this alloy that was formed becomes it creates a mirror. It's interesting with the brass acts as a mirror to show us what is inside of ourselves. And it's no accident that Christ was crucified on an altar. Well, the symbol of the crucifixion of Christ was upon an altar of brass. And this is telling us something. And a metal that was inspired by a son of Cain, a revolter, one in rebellion against the God of heaven. And the bringing together of 2 oppositional elements and to weld them together or to alloy them together to create this metal called brass.
Because it's a counterfeit of gold, isn't it?
It's a counterfeit. Yes. It's a counterfeit of gold.
It's to look like gold.
Looks like gold.
But it's not.
Like particularly in bronze.
Yeah, bronze has got tin.
It's got tin in it. I don't know how tin and copper operate with each other. But again, it can look like brass can look like gold depending on the ratio of zinc to copper. Yeah. It can look very gold-like. So it looks like gold, but it has oppositional elements in it. And so what I found interesting about this is, as I looked at this particular issue, and we look at the metals in the sanctuary, and the fact that Tubal-Cain was the one that developed brass, and that Jesus, the symbol of the sacrifice of Christ, is upon an altar of brass, that it's telling you something. It's telling you something. And as we have studied, you'll remember the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And I just want to read to you once again from Christ Object Lessons, page 263, because this was quite profound for me. I'll go directly to the Christ Object Lessons. See how well. 263. It says, in this parable, the rich man and Lazarus, Christ was meeting the people on their own ground. The doctrine of a conscious state of existence between death and resurrection was held by many of those who listened to the Saviour, Christ's words. The Saviour knew their ideas, and he framed his parable so as to inculcate important truths. So here you have the principle. Jesus is wanting to express a point, but he expresses it through their false ideas. It's an alloy. Truth being expressed through a false idea. It's an oppositional principle. And notice what it says. He framed his parable so as to inculcate important truths through these preconceived opinions, which are obviously wrong in themselves. He held up before his hearers a mirror wherein they might see themselves in their true relation to God. And that's exactly what the cross is. The cross is a fusion of God's mercy and Satan's justice. God is showing his mercy, because what is the purpose of the cross for us? Isn't it to tell us that God is showing mercy on us? I will be merciful to you. I will be merciful to you. But because we had embraced a concept of justice at war with God's justice, the only way this could be done was through the brass. A fusion, an alloy of two opposing principles. You see what I'm saying?
So to take this and apply it to the way most people think, it should have been a golden serpent. Because if God's justice is his love, then it should have been a golden serpent, not the brazen serpent.
Exactly. That's the point, isn't it? It should have been, the altar upon which Christ was crucified should have been gold. If it was only representing God's ideas, it should have been a golden altar. And as we've read in the statements before, in heaven, the tree of life is made of transparent gold. The apples that you see are gold mixed with silver. We only see gold and silver. And when you study gold and silver, Abraham had gold and silver. It doesn't mention brass. The gifts that were given to Rebekah by Eliezer, Abraham's servant, to Rebekah was gold and silver, not brass. So we see in the line of Abraham, it's gold and silver. So the element of brass is suggesting to us God is meeting man's ideas of justice, his understanding of justice. That's what the brass, I believe, is telling us in this fusion. And what's amazing is that in the combination of the copper and the zinc, that combination creates a mirror in which you see yourself. This is the absolute majesty and wisdom of the cross. To be able to, one, show God's mercy, satisfy Satan's justice system, provide a mirror into your soul and into mine to show us what we are like, and at the same time tell us that he will give us mercy. And it's so brilliant what God has done with the cross. And as I think about this, it becomes more and more exciting to me. Having unlocked this component, that it was Satan's justice. When Jesus is presenting his blood and saying, Father, my blood, my blood. It's to answer the bold accuser, as Ellen White says, to answer. Because in order for God to save us, as we know, we are the ones that have to believe that God will forgive us.
It's also the angels as well, because his whole justice system had contaminated the universe.
Reflecting Christ, page 58, tells us how that the angels were ready for us to be exterminated. Now, I was talking to Danny about this today. I don't believe they wanted to exterminate us. They understood the principles of how man would destroy himself but it's like, let man destroy himself now. Enough of this nonsense. Let man reap what he has sown. But they were being influenced by this justice system, even though they were holy, undefiled. They wouldn't kill people. They wouldn't have done that, I don't believe. But they're still, as you said, they're influenced by this wrong concept of justice. And so God had to lay his cross upon this brass. And that's why the serpent, that's why it's the serpent on the pole. It's Satan's justice that is being met. And that's why Christ is presented as the serpent upon the pole.
I looked up the word fiery because it said fiery serpent. I don't know if you've looked at that.
Not recently.
Poisonous, burning, but it also had effect of seraphim or majestic being.
Oh. Interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
Do we go back to the serpent in the garden? Now, that word there, serpent, is exactly the same word as the word for serpent in the garden. And there was a majestic being, wasn't there? That a winged being in the garden. And so, this is what I believe. Just like the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, I believe that that parable is a pattern that shows us exactly the process of the cross. The cross is a truth being presented through preconceived ideas. That's what and that's what I believe the brass is telling us. And as you picked up, why wasn't it gold?
Or silver.
Or silver? Why wasn't it one of those metals? Why is it brass? And as the Bible tells us, we can remind ourselves how that it says in Jeremiah, it says in Ezekiel, the children of Israel have become unto me brass, even the dross of silver. Brass in the Bible is not an element that is seen as something good in terms of the heavenly kingdom, in terms of God's kingdom. It's presented as something negative, not positive. And yet it's in the sanctuary. And what we see interesting is that in the sanctuary, when you look at the tent around the outside, in the entrance, the feet of the pillars in the entrance are made of brass. Brass is involved in all of the elements around. There's brass or sockets all the way around involved in the wall. Only within the sanctuary itself is it only gold and silver, which is interesting. And we all know that this is the part that represents heaven. The rest of it is representing earth. And wherever it is on the earth, you've got brass. And I believe that from my research and the study I've done so far, that the brass is a representation of God's mercy manifested through Satan's justice.
Very profound.
And that is a profound thought. But we have proof that this is God's method through the story of rich man. And there's others of the rich man and Lazarus. And I actually can think this is very exciting. It's going to help to explain things that we had not understood before. But as we go piece by piece, step by step, we see that the cross is making so much more sense. And why is this so important for us to understand? One of the reasons I believe it is so important is because everybody knows that God instituted the sacrificial system. And because of that, most Christians believe that it was God who desired sacrifice and offering through the Old Testament. And this is a great problem. This is a great problem. And the texts, as we know, when you have a certain mindset, a certain understanding, you can read verses that say, sacrifice and offering I have not desired. Oh, but God instituted them. God instituted the sacrificial system. So therefore, he must have wanted it. You rationalize it that way. But this sacrificial system is playing one of the key components of maintaining a dispensational mindset. That God was different in the Old Testament to what he is in the New Testament. But through this correct understanding and of the altar of brass here, we see that God is meeting Satan's concept of justice, because Satan's concept of justice is our concept of justice. And in order to convince us that he would forgive us, he had to meet this. He had to satisfy this to convince us of God's mercy. And so the cross is an alloy. It's a brass. It's a brass alloy of Satan's justice and God's mercy. And this is what the serpent on the pole is about. As, and think of that word, as Moses lifted up the serpent, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. You see, this is a direct parallel. Jesus to be considered a serpent, and yes, we read Romans chapter 8 where it says Christ was made sin for us. And what was that sin? Satan's justice concept. This justice is not God's character. It is sin to say that God would kill someone for going in the wrong direction, or not understanding, or going off, and so he's going to kill them. This is not God's concept of justice. And so this, I believe, is very, very important, that we follow this through very, very carefully. It's going to help us. And I would encourage you to study, look at brass in the Bible. The very idea that it was Tubal Cain was the one. Now what's very interesting about this, after I was on a flight, the flight from Perth to Bangkok, and I just started doing this study. And looking and following this all up and going through the brass and looking at it, I thought, wow, this is amazing. While I was in Bangkok, I got an email from Tony Pace in Vancouver Island, and he had almost the same thought process as I did. Looking at Tubal Cain, brass, just an absolute validation. Coming from two separate places, independent, I thought, we're onto something here. This is really, really important. And so I'm looking forward to expanding these ideas in the coming weeks, and to see that God is not the one who wanted to sacrifice animals, not in any way, shape or form. But again, the animal sacrifice is a principle of brass. It is God willing to show his mercy through man's concept of justice. That's what the sacrificial system represents. It was the only way that God could convince us that he would forgive us. And this is why, because for those of us who have an Adventist background, we say, why did Jesus tell the parable of the rich man and Lazarus? It has made the whole Christian world believe in eternally burning hell.
Made our job so hard.
It's made our job really, really hard. But when you understand the principle, Christ is speaking God's mercy through Satan's justice. And people say, God has nothing to do with Satan. But how else does man come in contact with man to reach him where he is? In a concept, how do you reach a mind that is completely encapsulated with sinful thinking? How do you connect with that mind?
That's what we're asking.
A mind that is completely at war with you. How do you connect with that mind? How do you reach that mind? This is how Christ was made sin for us. And this is why it says in Testimonies to Ministers 245, Testimonies to Ministers 245.2, that God divested himself of the endearing qualities of a father, and he assumed the character of a judge. That's an alloy principle. It's an alloy principle. When does God divest himself of his endearing qualities of a father? When does he do this? To meet us where we are. We needed to know that justice would be swiftly dealt with, that it would be met, and because this is our conception, this is our understanding. And what I'm sharing with you, most of the world will reject. No, most of the church will reject. Most of the churches will reject what we're saying. But thank God, the prostitutes and the sinners will accept it. And they will go into the kingdom first. So they're just some of the thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Many other things. I just wanted to say in closing, I'll indulge you a little bit longer. Laurel and I had to go to a funeral today from a family that is very dear to us. I served with this man. His name is Colin Tyler. He was senior elder at the church where I was as a young man, and I worked under him as a junior elder, and I learnt many things from this man. And it was just a reminder to me of where I learnt about eldership, how to be an elder, to be able to work under men. And Colin was a man that whenever Colin was in a board meeting, I felt I could relax, because storms could be brewing around him and all kinds of stuff, and he just was calm, and he would say the right thing at the right time. And I really, really appreciated his mentorship. Not that he actively mentored me, but I sat in his home, and a man that measured his words, was a wonderful family man. So it was quite sobering to sit there. And as once again, as for many of us, think about so many of my friends in the Adventist church, it makes me want to pray morning and evening for our beloved brothers and sisters in the church, that they will stand with us on the sea of glass. So, with that, what are we doing for... Are we having a season of prayer? Shall we do that? We'll say goodbye to our online audience. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time.
30 seconds, whatever that is.
Yeah.